This has been an ongoing project of mine for quite some time. This consists of a lot of precise and small purple footholds and these sharp credit card crimp handholds. It's known as the edge project for now because every foot position I do on this requires a very severe edge. Now, what do I look for on a foothold to determine can I edge it at all? Usually a very distinct flat surface, and especially that my body wants to move perpendicular to that. So this edge is running here. I want my body pressing this way. A lot of my movements are going to be small, potential dead points, but just going directly in that path, not moving around the hold, not towing in with the hold very well, or my body is stable and I'm simply moving to a hold and then moving the rest of my body after I catch it. So we're relieving some pressure with the handholds to gradually move the feet. With my foot, the position I want to take is going to be attempting to plantar flex my foot as much as possible, and then I'm dorsiflexing my toes and driving them in together onto the big toe. That provides a little bit more support. This also means, though, that while I can extend and flex through the rest of my leg, this really doesn't get a chance to move very much. So wherever I've got it, I need to be able to press through and maintain that same direction of push with my foot. We're going to focus very much on the tip of the toe and a pretty narrow band of inside and outside edging. If I try to let my foot relax a little bit as I move around, it'll kind of buckle out of there because I've got a lot of force through that big toe. So we're trying to maintain this position as hard as possible. For footwear, what do I want? Well, I want something that is generally stiffer, more structured, more supportive, and a little bit more capable of seizing up on a hold. So I do have my Magos here. They've got a good structured toe and a stiff midsole underneath the big toe. Problem is they're very flexible and they use a sticky rubber, and because I've got so many severe edges to make, I fear that this rubber is going to heat up and deform a little bit too much, and so while I can do a first few moves, it's probably going to roll off the next couple. So I don't know that I can actually use the Magos for this, especially because I don't really have an in cut on these to pull in on, so that flexibility isn't terribly useful for me. So instead I'll probably be using my Boost sticks. They're going to have a rubber that's designed to seize up on those holds a little bit better, so it won't deform nearly as much. And then I've got a lot of support through that full length outsole and the midsole underneath here, and wrapped up around, big significant midsole to it. So I can drive a lot of force on a very small area. So we're gonna go ahead and put these on and try this opening move. This is probably the hardest move of the entire problem. It requires me to press against a smaller distinct edge, and then I'm going to be outside edging this, rotating in to my inside edge once I get off the ground. So the interesting thing with an edge is we can oftentimes, because we're on such a small point, rotate our foot back and forth, whereas if you're on a smear, usually you've got to stand up and kick it around, or even towing in, you've got to kind of bounce it across. So we can pivot really well with an edge because we're just maintaining a small point so we can rotate around that axis with a lot of force. Okay. One thing about my shoes with these is how I sized them is they're an uncomfortable size. They are really taut around my foot, and a lot of people will use a more structured, more supportive, stiffer shoe for their edging shoe because the shoe can support itself a little bit better, right? A very soft shoe obviously needs your foot inside, and so it has to be cammed really hard to do any kind of movements, right? Otherwise it just collapses. However, because the Boost stick in particular is trying to get my foot into that really stable edging position, I do want to actually downsize it as much as I would any other shoe to make sure it can do its job, right? I want to edge really well, so we're using a heavily downsized shoe for this purpose. Obviously though, if you're climbing for a longer period of time, you just want a bit more support, you don't need to downsize nearly as hard, but I just got 10 feet of board to make, so we can deal with the discomfort. All right, so opening position, pulling off. All my board problems are sit starts, so we'll kind of get used to this. So I'm going to be trying to plantar flex my foot, dorsiflex my toes. They're all packed in really hard together on this singular point. With my other foot, we're outside edging, so I'm kind of draped across here. Yes, my foot is more dorsiflexed, but I'm not actually actively dropping it. I'm trying to press through here. You'll also see when I stand up, I get to rotate around it. So this is just to get me up off the ground with a point of contact. We're going to see what we can do. Now you might have noticed I didn't have much range with my feet actually moving. They were in pretty stable positions. Even if they were swiveling, they might have gotten a little bit more plantar flexion as I went through because my foot's trying to do that the entire time. I'm driving into this hold hard. Now, because these holds are especially, side pulls and underclings, and they're not terribly big, I have to push into them hard. Hence, again, I'm edging through these because that's the only thing that's going to make sure that I maintain contact on that. So that was pretty successful. Let's go ahead and go a couple moves in. You can see a little bit more of the edging action that's going to happen on here. And especially while these look like rather big holds, most of this is pretty useless because it's sloped out. It's more of a smear. This is where I'm trying to press. And you'll see that kind of precision that we're going to have. So let's go ahead and try a couple more moves edging through here. And you might get a better idea of exactly the foot position I'm trying to make, exactly how precise these need to be. So we'll go one more move in. So again, plantar flexing my foot, dorsaflexing the toes, trying to cram them all together as much as possible. And the same thing with this foot. Well, that's quite successful. We've got it into two parts right now, but you might have seen I'm really stepping just with the big toe, right? So I don't have a lot of need for a lot of contact because the shoe won't really deform that much. I'm also supporting it with my toes by pressing really hard with that big toe, cramming the rest of the toes in there and pushing constantly. So I can't let my foot really relax because this is such a small surface that without that constant push, it'll just roll right off, right? So I don't get to sink into it very much. You also saw that outside edge where I still have my big toe pointed. Sometimes people will talk about using the pinky toe and saying, oh, it's stiff enough that I can get across here, but I limit my range to rotate, one of the very big benefits we talked about with an edge. As well as this is not where the midsole has been located. So this one definitely covers underneath the toes, but most of your shoes, it's positioned especially underneath the big toe. This wrap up and over on the boot stick is positioned around the big toe. And a lot of shoes might just have this cut out right here. So some of the softer, less structured shoes will just be underneath the big toe. I think I've only ever done one route in my life where stepping with the pinky was the beta, and that was on a curious 12C at World Wall called Slug Lever, where you come out and you do this really blind back step, and there's no way you can really rotate your foot to get the big toe on. And it's a pretty distinct little spike that sticks out to where you can go ahead and stand on the pinky toe because your hands have you enough. So you're not really edging in that sense. So we're always going to try to drive with that big toe, and that ability to rotate your foot back and forth and really get that positioning of your big toe is crucial for edging.